Well, welcome in to My Dogs Are Barking on MPW Digital. I'm alongside Neal McCready today. You know him from McCready and Siskey and about 17 other shows. Neal is always on the run. Neal, what is your schedule like during the week?
It would take 10 minutes to discuss that. It's Sunday's really busy. A lot of I do my 10 weekend thoughts thing. I cover Ole Miss for Rivals, and so I do a 10 weekend thoughts every single week for rebelgrove.com. And then on Monday, the podcast palooza begins. We do a morning podcast every day, Chase Parham and I. That starts around 8, usually finished with that in total by 10. I've got media stuff usually around noon. McCready and Siskey's at 2. A lot of writing on Monday. On Tuesday, do the same thing, literally the exact same thing. And then McCready and Siskey's at 2, more writing. And usually on Tuesday afternoon, I start taping stuff for MPW Digital Extra every week. I usually tape those interviews, start those on Tuesday into Tuesday night. I tape Pete's Pigskin Preview on Tuesday night with Pete Deweese. Wednesday's another pretty heavy podcast day. Like today, I've got the Josh Hendrickson show here in about 40 minutes. I tape the Butcher versus the Dance Instructor every Wednesday at 1:30. It's just a lot. I mean, football's a lot, and I'm not complaining about it at all. But like, I get to this is week 7 in a row where Ole Miss has had a game, and so there's just been. I'm excited about next week being an open date. It's the challenge for me is going to be forcing myself to take a little time and kind of mentally relax and get away from it. Late next week, I'm getting out of town. With my middle daughter, my middle child, my youngest daughter. She's a senior at Arkansas. She's in Cayo, and it's Dad's weekend at Arkansas. So I'm going to go up there on Thursday and hang out with her for the rest of the weekend. And so I'm going to make myself Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday take 4 days completely off. So I'm excited about that beyond words.
Well, good for you. And during the bye week, I'm sure nothing crazy will happen. I'm sure it'll just be real quiet. Everything should be fine.
You know what, man? And I'm sure something will happen, and I'm sure there'll be like 8 commitments, and there'll be like all. And if it does, it does. It's one of those deals. One of the things I've gotten better about. I used to be horrible about it. Is I would have like plans, and I would drop everything for work. And in this case, I'm just gonna disappear for 4 days, and if it all blows up, it just blows up, and it'll be all right, or it won't be. And it's kind of like that, the one thing I do know, and I've gotten really good about this, is that this will be the last Cayo Dad's weekend. This will be the last one of those. And so I'm going to put that in front of work and all that. Hopefully it is a normal bye week where nothing really happens and they just go out recruit and stuff. Who cares? And I'll do that. And then I'll drive back on Sunday and crank it back up again. But I'm going to give myself that because there's zero chance that I'll look back in life and go, I really wish I'd covered some recruiting on that off weekend. And there is a 100% chance that I would look back and go, I wish I would have just stopped and sort of enjoyed that weekend with Caroline. So I've gotten a lot better about that, Landon.
That's some phenomenal perspective. Yeah, well, yeah, you're right. Even if everything goes crazy, and as this past weekend it did, with Vanderbilt upsetting Alabama, I want to touch on that for a moment before we move on to this upcoming week. For those who don't know, I live in Tuscaloosa. I've lived here for about 12 years, so all throughout Nick Saban's dominance, been here. Derrick Henry and I arrived here the same year, and he and I obviously have a lot in common. Obviously physical specimens.
Yeah,
but
you look a lot like him.
Yeah, that's what, and some folks say that.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting is the folks in Tuscaloosa, many folks are really nervous to the point where I'm sure you've seen some things. People are really, really talking about this man's attire as if it, makes any sort of a difference. And, as much warning as folks try to give of, look, this is his first year, you're not going to go undefeated. Of course, no one saw this Vanderbilt loss coming.
Yeah.
But Neal, if they lose if they lose a few more games, if they lose 2 more games,
Okay.
look out. Because with their remaining schedule, you got South Carolina this weekend. Then you go on the road at Tennessee.
Yeah.
That's and Tennessee's going to be fired up to win that game.
Sure.
You got Missouri at home, bye week, then on the road at LSU before that final three games. Do you see it? Is it possible that Alabama finishes 9-3 going into the year? Do you think they'll get it fixed? And if they do end up losing 2 more, dude, is the whole state going to catch on fire?
I mean, I worked in that state for a long time. I mean, look, they'll beat South Carolina. They could lose in Knoxville, easy. I think they'll beat Missouri. You never know about LSU. Like LSU, I don't know what LSU will look like by the time that game rolls around. And then, obviously they'll beat Mercer. At Oklahoma could be interesting for them. And then, I think they'll beat Auburn. Look, welcome to reality. I mean, welcome to your new world. This is, Matt Moscona did this on AFR the other day, and I love Matt. He's funny, and he's really steered into the hate Bama stuff. But he's right. I mean, I'm not going to do the whole. He had if you haven't watched it, you should. It's on AFR LSU Baton Rouge. He's got the Grim Reaper thing, and he's decked out in black and playing the song and welcome to your new reality. But welcome to your new reality, man. I mean, what'd you think? Did you think you were going to dominate the league forever? You had 15 years that you dominated the league. They won 6 national titles, 5 SEC titles in 12 years. Hey, it's never happening again. You're never doing it again. I worked in that state. Before Saban, it was Dennis Franchione, who couldn't get out fast enough. It was Mike Price, who did the stripper thing. And then it was Mike Shula, who was a beloved son who they never accepted because he didn't win enough. And he had a 10-win season where they went to the Cotton Bowl. That was their reality before that. Gene Stallings won a national championship. Bill Curry didn't. Ray Perkins didn't. And before that, it was Bear Bryant. Newsflash. This is probably going to become more normal now. Kalen DeBoer's really good. But is he Nick Saban? No, because guess what, Landon? Nobody's Nick Saban. The closest there is to Nick Saban is his former defensive coordinator, who's now at Georgia. And he's not coming to Alabama. So this is your new reality. Adjust to it. You had a phenomenal run. You should celebrate it. You have celebrated it. You named the stadium after him. You did. You should have. It's the right thing to do. It was an incredible run. But it's over. And there's not a program in the country that wouldn't basically sell their soul for that 15-year run. But all things come to an end. And this has come to an end. Because the Vanderbilt game, I didn't get to watch it live. I've gotten to go back and look at parts of it. It wasn't a fluke. Alabama got its ass kicked at the line of scrimmage. And it had nothing to do with what Kalen DeBoer wears or any of that BS. This was about, look, in this era, you can't do what Saban did. You can't stack a roster full of 85 guys that are going to wait their turn to play. I'm not minimizing what he did. It was amazing what he did. And Kirby's come close to doing it at Georgia. But even at Georgia, you can see some chinks in the armor where they don't have the depth anymore. Because now when kids come in as a 4 or 5-star player and they don't play right away, they're ready to leave. And they can leave. And then they can leave again and again and again and again. So it's over. That run is done. I'll be honest. Saturday wasn't as fluky as people are acting like it was. It just wasn't. They were playing South Florida in the fourth quarter. Yeah, they blew out Wisconsin, but Wisconsin lost their quarterback on the first drive of the game. And they weren't very good in the first place. I mean, Alabama is very good. They're a really good team. They're really well coached. I know some of their coaches. They're great people. They're going to do a good job. But the days of people just dominating this league, it's over. Look around at the landscape. We've seen in the last 2 weeks, Kentucky come to Ole Miss and win. We've seen Alabama go to Vanderbilt and lose. And we've seen Tennessee go to Arkansas hours later and lose. You can do this with so many teams in the league right now where you go, hey, you change a couple plays here and they're undefeated. You change a couple plays here and they have 4 losses. You can do that. And I think that's just where we are. The SEC is the closest thing that you're going to find in college football to the NFL. What is the NFL known for? Parity.
You mentioned the Ole Miss loss versus Kentucky. I want to touch on this for a moment. Ole Miss before the season started, I remember I was telling a story about a friend of mine I had in high school, and many people probably had something similar to this, where it was a guy that was kind of geeky, didn't really know how to talk to girls, right? And then we go away in the summer, and like he works out during the summer, kind of hits a growth spurt. He comes back in the fall, and like he looks the part of like the cool jock. When it came time to like see any sort of female, like the dude would run. He was not ready. He was not ready to ask out the pretty girl. Because on the inside, that's all he had ever been was, the first portion. And I was thinking with Ole Miss has every single tool to look like an elite team. Like the roster is arguably the best it's ever been. Obviously, Lane Kiffin's been a phenomenal coach and recruiter. But I wondered, they look the part. Can they now step into that? And I know they lose versus Kentucky, but they have an opportunity this weekend to not just get back on track, but to really take a step forward, especially with Alabama losing to a team they weren't expecting to lose to and the rest of their teams on their schedule. Where are you at with Ole Miss?
Yeah, I think Saturday's huge. I thought last Saturday was huge. They answered it. They answered the bell extremely well. The bell's going to ring again on Saturday night in Tuscaloosa, in Baton Rouge. They got to answer it, and I kind of think they probably will. And if they do, they basically traded LSU for Kentucky, because I think conventional wisdom going into the season was that Ole Miss would lose 2 games. They'd lose at LSU and they'd lose at home to Georgia. That was sort of the consensus how they get to 10-2. Well, they lost to Kentucky. If they beat LSU, you basically traded. You're still 6-1 coming out of going into the open date, and the finish to their season is pretty doable, right? They get Oklahoma at home. They're better than Oklahoma. They got to go to Arkansas. They're better than Arkansas. They should win that game. I mean, those games can be challenging. As we've seen again. I mean, you if you don't learn the lessons from the league, that's on you. Can Ole Miss lose to Oklahoma? Yeah, sure. I mean, Ole Miss lost to Kentucky. Ole Miss is better than Kentucky. But on that day, Kentucky played a really clean game. They had a path to win. They had a really good plan. They're very good up front. They kind of dominated up front enough to get Ole Miss into a lot of 3rd and longs. They were able to discombobulate Ole Miss's passing attack a good bit. And then they made the play when they had to make the play. Tip your hat. I mean, that's what you should do. Mark Stoops has been in this league for a long time. He's a really good coach. They had a really good plan, and they executed that plan, and they got it done. They won. It wasn't fluky. They got it done. Now, I'm going to borrow a line from Hugh Freeze here because it's not how it works. But if Ole Miss and Kentucky played 10 times in a row in Oxford, Ole Miss probably wins 8 of those games, probably 4 out of 5, right? But hey, on that given day, Kentucky got 1 of the 2, and they did it. It's a dub. It'll go down in history as a dub. There's nothing Ole Miss can do about it now. So Saturday's huge. You lose to LSU, look, it's going to get really hard to get to the playoff. I mean, you're talking about being perfect. You can't stumble at all. You probably have to beat Georgia at home. There's no probably to it. You would have to beat Georgia at home. You'd much rather go into the Georgia game with, hey, this is kind of a free shot, as opposed to, hey, we must do this or else. So, yeah, it's a monstrous game for their team. But this is a mature team. They have a lot of older players, a lot of guys that have been there a while. Kiffin built this team through the transfer portal. He did. But a lot of these guys have been there 3 years now. You've got some chemistry. You do have some continuity. You do have some people that have some roots, Jackson Dart and J.J. Pegues and Jared Ivey and kind of Jordan Watkins. I mean, there's a list of guys that have been there a minute. And so it's not your thrown together transfer portal team where you got a whole bunch of dudes that have only been there for a year and they look around like, I don't really care. I don't know you, whatever. I mean, they're above that. But look, it's going to be a hard game. I mean, they're celebrating the 100th year of Tiger Stadium. I personally don't think that kind of stuff matters unless you let the game stay really close and competitive into the late third quarter, into the fourth quarter, and all of a sudden, man, that stadium smells blood and it gets loud and it gets disruptive. And now you're just a mistake away. All LSU needs is a play, right? I mean, at the end of that game against Kentucky was like 4th and 7, 4th and 8 from their own 18, 19. And they're like, let's go for it. Let's do it. Let's take a shot. And they did. They threw a deep ball. Brock Vandegrift threw a perfect pass. Barry and Brown got open, caught it, made a play. They scored. They won. So, I mean, you shorten the game to one possession. Well, hell, anybody can beat anybody in a one-possession game. And so that's the key for Ole Miss. Can you have the maturity to go down there, build a lead, take the crowd out of it? And if they do, if they win, I think they're a playoff team. I really do. I expect that, but I've been in this league and covered enough games in Tiger Stadium to know that you can go there and see you can lose your poise. You can get rattled and a game can go south on you. And so it's a dangerous spot for Ole Miss. And certainly by losing to Kentucky, this LSU game, you minimized your room for error.
Yeah, I mean, for all the talk nationally last week. Now they're not really talking as much now, but for all the talk last week of Ole Miss's season is done, and they weren't who we thought they were. A win versus LSU in Death Valley, and all that. Winning solves everything.
Yeah, the talking heads with the whole this team wasn't. Are we doing that with Alabama this week? Are we doing that with Tennessee this week? I mean, I'm not saying that Ole Miss is going to go win the national championship at all. I'm not saying that, but. No, again, this is that thing that we're all going to have to figure out. This is now professional sports. You can fix your roster quickly. Mm-hmm. Look at Vanderbilt. They go out and get Diego Pavia. Look at Arkansas. They go out and they get Taylor Green. They kind of fix a couple of things at quarterback. All of a sudden, you're a little more competitive. And now, even though you're not as good, the margin is much different. And, Arkansas made a play. Vanderbilt made some plays, right? And so it's NFL. In the NFL, inferior teams beat superior teams every week, every single week. It's probably going to start happening at this level more than we're used to.
And for a reminder, for My Dogs Are Barking tomorrow, we will have our Week 7 matchups and picks with Austin. So we'll be making that pick. Hey, what does it mean to be rich? Maybe it's less about reaching a magic number and more about discovering the magic in life. Skip Langley is your Batesville, Mississippi, Edward Jones advisor, serving clients in the area and across the state. Count on him for financial strategies that can help you support a life you love. Because the key to being rich is knowing what counts. Contact him today at 662-563-9843, and together you can find your rich. Edward Jones, member SIPC. I want to finish with this.
I'll say real quick. I know Skip talked to Skip the other day when you guys joined MPW. He was one of the first people to reach out, wanting to get in on your show, wanting to get in on MPW. So if you're out there and you're in the Batesville area or anywhere around there, get in touch with Skip. He'll take tremendous care of you. He's a super guy, and excited to have him as part of MPW in the same way we're excited to have you guys as part of MPW as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure Skip's glad to be here, and so are we. And we certainly do thank him for partnering along with us. We'll finish with this. Mississippi State and Georgia got the Bulldogs and the Bulldogs this weekend, 3:15 Central kick in Athens. The question with this game, and the question that's been in my mind all week as more things have come out about Georgia, is the start of this game. Do you think that Georgia comes out, because I see this going two ways easy, comes out sluggish due to all these distractions, now a seventh arrest of a team? That's the first part. That's the part that I think, okay, logical, like there's just a lot of distractions going around. The second part of that, though, is Kirby Smart is a Nick Saban disciple, and he just saw Alabama fall to Vanderbilt, which is all the motive. All he wants to do is point to that and go, see, if you take your
Sure.
eyes off for just a second,
Yeah.
things can happen. And we'll make the final picks tomorrow on the show. But what are your thoughts on which direction that goes?
Well, I think you're astute to point that out, that he probably has a lot going on with his team this week, right? I mean, you've got, they've had a lot of traffic related stuff. This is deeper than that. This is a bad look. This is, hey, what are we doing? This is probably some internal stuff about who are we recruiting? What are we doing culturally? Are we missing something? This is probably a little bit of a head scratcher for them, a little bit of a soul searching thing. They have Texas next week. Huge game. Georgia already has an L. They lost to Alabama, and the loss to Alabama looks a little worse today because Bama lost to Vandy, and now you have to run the possibility through your head that Alabama's not going to be this undefeated SEC champ, and we went and lost on the road and blah, blah, blah. There's a chance that the Alabama loss just looks like another loss. And so Georgia's still got to play Texas. They still got to play at Ole Miss. There's some, they still play Tennessee or not? I don't think so. Let's see. Georgia. Yeah. We got to play Tennessee too. They got some weird games. Georgia does. So this is a big moment for them coming up with Texas. And I think that's the danger for them, is being so focused on next week with the Horns that they overlook Mississippi State a little bit. From a betting standpoint, I kind of like State in the points here.
Yes,
State
still 32 this morning.
Yeah, I've seen it up to like 33 and a half, 34. But you look at Mississippi State, the way that they played with Texas. I was impressed with that. You and I talked about that before that game. It was like, hey, you're not going to win the game, but you can with the first year coach, and you're trying to establish some culture and things of that nature. You can. It's the only time in this league that you can go get a moral victory, right? Is, hey, we went and not covered the line, but it's about the way you played. And Mississippi State was very competitive with Texas into the third quarter, and then Texas kind of pulled away and did the thing. Look, Mississippi State's not going to Athens and winning, but can you go play a competitive game? Can you line up and be able to get back to Starkville next week and go, all right, we've played arguably two of the best four teams in the country at their place, and we've been respectful. We've been respectable. We can build off this, because that's all Jeff can do right now. All he can do is build off these experiences. And so, but if you're Georgia and you're Kirby, I don't know how much you're going to get out of, hey, let's go beat Mississippi State by 49 points, because the truth is their season starts to really hinge on what happens after this game. So it's kind of a weird spot for them. And yet at the same time, he needs to get his team's attention, because he can't keep having these things happen off the field. It's going to impact their recruiting at some point. It's going to impact their ability to build the Alabama East that they've built for a while. See, I'm doing the Saban hands and everything.
And you worked in the newspaper business, and so did I. And everything that gets reported is not everything that happens. So we read a lot of things that's happened within Georgia's program. This is not like this is all that's on Kirby's plate.
Right.
They have got a lot of things that are going on internally. And I'm not pretending to have some sort of mole inside the building, but like, that's just how things go. When people really don't want things out, most folks do not hear about things. So they do. They've got a lot of things on their plate, and you have to wonder at some point, like, is it ever going to catch up to them? Like, is the train going to keep rolling, or are they going to get? Is this something we're going to remember forever, like 01 Miami, 02 Miami?
You want the truth? If he wins, nah. If you start losing, yeah. I'll give you an example. When Hugh Freeze was here, there were a lot of people that knew there was stuff kind of happening off the field, but they were winning. They won in 2014. They won in 2015. They went down to Mississippi State and ruined Dak Prescott senior night, all that stuff. But in 2016, all of a sudden, They lost late, got blown out by Vanderbilt, and then played a Mississippi State team in the Egg Bowl. That was a state team that entered that game 4-7. And Ole Miss at home lost by 5 touchdowns to Mississippi State. Mississippi State, as much as Dan Mullen hated Hugh Freeze and Ole Miss and stuff, Dan Mullen was bored in the fourth quarter. He didn't keep running it up. It was like, what are we doing? And there was knowing that they were preparing for next week, right? I mean, they ended up going to a bowl game. I can't remember, Fort Worth or somewhere. They went to a bowl game at 5-7 because of the APR stuff. But it wasn't like, hey, let's save something for next week. There was no next week.
Yeah, they weren't planning on it. Yeah.
They won 55-20. And all of a sudden, man, within 24 hours, my email's filling up with, hey, you got to check into this and this and this. And so there's the answer. If he's winning, nah, you're Teflon. If you start losing, or if you start not winning at the same level people you expect you to win, and in their case, it's national championship, yeah, it'll start to get to you. Everyone will turn on everyone. I mean, it's a story as old as time. So yeah, he's got to get that stuff fixed, unless he's about to go run the table, unless he's about to go blow out Texas and kick Ole Miss's ass and beat Tennessee's ass and go to the playoff and Final Four, win the national championship. If he does that, nobody will care. Nobody will say a word. But if he doesn't, yeah, people will start going, hey, what's happening? Are you losing the culture inside your program and stuff like that? Yeah.
It's going to be interesting going down the final stretch. And tomorrow on the Week 7 matchups and pick show, we'll talk a little bit about Mississippi State recruiting news, talk about the matchups of the week, and also talk about Michael Van Buren's second career start. First one being in Austin, Texas. The second one being at Georgia. So it really can't get much tougher for a guy. But coming out of that, man, what else can you throw at him for your first 2 starts? So
you'll find out everything about him, right? I mean, because it only gets a little easier from here. I mean, those are 2 really difficult assignments, and you learn a lot about him. You learn a lot about the other kids in the program. And for a first-year coach, that's kind of a gift. It doesn't feel like a gift right now, but it's kind of a gift for going down the road. I mean, you are able to really get an assessment of where you are. And even if that where you are is really sobering, it's still having the fact in front of you is what you need. I mean, I know we got to go. Look at Clark Lee. He talked on Saturday night about last December. They'd come off a 2-10, 0-8. It was bad. There was no spinning it. There was no, hey, we were really, no, It was bad. And he talked about how there were some really dark days. He said there were some days in December when in that building it was right foot, left foot, breathe. Right foot, left foot, breathe. It was bad. And yet he had a lot of information in front of him, and he was able to assess it honestly, and it's probably painfully. And, look, I think that might be where Jeff's headed at the end of the season, where you're going to have some moments where okay, we played these teams. This is what happened. Here's how it happened. What are the commonalities? And there might be a little bit of right foot, left foot, breathe, where you go, all right, we've got to reassess some things. That's the only way you do it, though, right? I mean, it's the whole. It's understanding that you've got to be honest with yourself, and then go from there. And I mean, look at Vanderbilt. I mean, they did that. They did a pretty dramatic overhaul of a lot of things. Like, if you read about everything that Vanderbilt did between the last game with Tennessee last year and the first game this year, it's pretty dramatic. And it's stuff that a lot of coaches just don't have the fortitude to do, because you have to admit that not only did we fail, but I failed, and I've got to fix this and this and this. I might have to bring in some different people. I might have to get rid of some people who are my friends. I might have to do some painful things, but at the end of the day, that's the objective. And so as much as I know Mississippi State's kind of the laughing stock right now, if you will, of the league, I don't know that this is a terrible thing. I really don't. I don't know that sometimes starting out bad is a bad thing, because you can learn from that. You can trick yourself in a year one by accidentally going 7-5. Oh, it feels good, right? Oh, it feels so good. And you're so tempted to go, oh, see, we've got the answers, when in reality you don't. And then that next year is kind of sobering. I'd rather start kind of rock bottomish where you're like, okay, we've got to fix this. There's no avoiding it. There's no spinning it. There's no sugarcoating it. It's no, these are things that must be fixed for us to get to where we're trying to go. And where are they trying to go? Like everybody else in the league, you're trying to get to the top of the league. And right now, the top of the league is Texas and Georgia and schools like that. And so you get to play them. I mean, it's a brutal road schedule for Mississippi State, at Texas, at Georgia, at Ole Miss. I mean, that's brutal.
At Tennessee as well.
At Tennessee, that's brutal. You're playing 4 teams that, as of today, consider themselves playoff contenders, and you got to go to their places. That is a lot of material that you'll have at the end of the season to study, and I think that's important.
Well, Neal, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure you're subscribed to MPW Digital. You can also follow My Dogs Are Barking on Twitter at MyDogsPod to keep up with our latest news of when videos are posted. But until next time, thank you for listening.